Good evening, everybody. I'm going to have Mr. Wentz and Mr. Padilla come join me this evening. Well, we're continuing to keep that conversation and the work of this study process alive. And our hope this evening is to kind of continue moving through that process as we dive deeper into the study. Thanks again to your feedback last meeting. So just to kind of bring ourselves up to speed of where we are, this evening is not administrative recommendations. This evening is about diving deeper into the study of option one, and most importantly, about the baseline investigation regarding our facilities. When this process began some 2 years or so ago, we knew that we were talking about three legs of that stool: finances, facilities, and programming of our educational environments. The facilities is an important one. And as I believe Dr. Williams shared earlier at the end of the summer, that kind of longer timeline of how our facilities have been on these cycles, and we were due for that facility upgrade. So we're going to take a deep dive into that facility approach. And when I mean that, we're talking about mechanicals, electrical, and plumbing. And then we're going to dive deep into option one as a baseline conversation. Again, not administrative recommendations, because all along this process, we've been talking about those three legs of the stool when we're getting into the details about efficiencies and staffing and realignment. That's not this evening. That's moving forward into the next stages of these conversations. So tonight, we're going to talk about a deeper dive in option one, the probable cost to maintain. As I said, that's the systems. That's how to avoid interruption of service through all of our schools based on their mechanicals, electricals, and plumbing. And then, of course, that deeper dive into what will we do for option one. So just to kind of recircle us back to the timeline we've been referencing, this is the exciting part of that study and process where we're bringing together the teams of the three legs, of course, our educational programming, our finances, and our facilities. And this evening, I'm going to have Mr. Wentz and Mr. Padilla. We're going to kind of tag team once again as we unpack option one at a deeper level. Moving into the Property and Finance Committee, which is coming up October 18th, Mrs. Chichuli and her team are going to be diving deep into our financial overview through PFM. And then moving into the last meeting of the month of October, we're going to unpack the elementary part of option 4 and 5. Then moving into November, the secondary part of 4 and 5, that secondary campus, is a lot to digest as compared to the elementary components, and looking at how that funding and the expansion would look. Then from there, moving into the committee recommendations that we see a best recommendation to achieve the efficiencies that we are charged with at the beginning of this process. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Wentz to come up and join me, see if you have anything to add to that timeline conversation, and then start to digest option one.
Thank you, Dr. Krauser. Thanks again for having us back again. We're happy to be here. And Dr. Krause, I think you did a pretty good overview. Again, we really believe in feeding this information out in smaller pieces. We had a meeting last week with Dr. Krauser and the administrative team, and I think it lasted, 3 hours? Going over all options. And if that is what we did here at the board, we'd have glass eyes looking back at us, nobody paying attention. So the way we're doing this, really dive deep into one today. And like Dr. Krauser said, we're going to unpack this in small pieces. Nick, can you advance that? This doesn't seem to be. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right. So this is a slide just for memory's sake. This is where we left the conversation last time. This is 5 different study options that we put together, and we talked about the advantages, disadvantages of each. And at the end of the conversation, there was the decision to move forward with 3 of those 5 options and to dive deeper into them. So today, obviously, is going to be study 1, which is maintain the current grade alignment. And next time you see us giving a presentation, we'll be going over study 4 and study 5 at the elementary level, which is changing some of the grade alignments and the uses of buildings. There we go. And then everybody should be familiar with this. I have a basic placemat, I should say, for each one of these options, where we start talking about what happens to the buildings. Now, in this case, everybody should be very familiar because this is the way that the buildings are currently aligned. 2 K through 2s, 2 3 through 5s, middle school, high school, education tech center, and a facilities building. Oops. Wow, this clicker really doesn't like me. Okay. Um, so what does it mean to do this? Basically, what I'm tasked with here is a configuration of buildings and a planned program. And that planned program was developed by Dr. Krauser and the administrative team by going through community input, the visioning exercises, everything that needs to go in the building is quantified. And that's kind of what we reviewed last week too. I guess that was 2 weeks ago. And really that's showing the deficiencies in the building. So again, what you're about to see here and what we're proposing is not stuff that we brought to the table and said, this is what you should put in your building. It's building elements that Dr. Krauser and his team, along with community input and a lot of research and recommendations, put together as the planned program. The other piece that was brought to us at last meeting was to look at zoning. And we did a preliminary investigation into the zoning. We'll start this on Valley View Elementary. So to meet the plan program, we're going to have to repurpose some classrooms in the building. And by repurposing the classrooms, that means we need to replace them somewhere else. So what you're seeing here on the right-hand side, that's the site plan with some circulation noted. Circulation for parent drop-off is in blue, circulation for bus drop-off is in yellow. And essentially the white is the existing building with the red being proposed additions. And yes, you're getting a little glimpse of the high school over here to the side. We'll expand into that in the future part of the presentation here. Essentially, what we have here is a zoning of 31.41 acres. Now that's your entire high school campus. And we're in an R1 district, which means we're allowed to have 45% impervious area. Now, this is an existing non-conforming condition. So what that means is you're already over your 45%, and anything that we do to the site would be in excess of that. So anything that happens at the high school site, we're probably going to have to get involved with civil engineers and probably have to apply for a variance for that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue it. It just means, hey, we have this extra hurdle to jump over in the process. Now, I calculated it 2 different ways, depending on how the township looks at the turf, and that's the turf for both the fields that are out there. If it is including turf in the impervious area, then it's even a higher number. You know, your existing is 77%, and the proposed would be 80. Apologize for the clicker here. So what does that mean for the building? So we reviewed what was deficient in the building last time and areas that couldn't fit within the building footprint. And one of the things that came out of it was the inequity of collaboration spaces and the inequity of them properly placed throughout the building. So the first thing we did was look at proper places to create collaboration spaces. And those are being shown in the yellow here. And again, they're distributed throughout the building with better access to small group instruction spaces, which are in the reddish color. Now, in order to achieve this, like I said, we have to take out some of the classrooms that are existing in areas that made sense. And by doing that, we are in a position where we have to add classrooms at another part of the building to replace those lost. So essentially what you're seeing here is a more or less a 3-pronged school. You have a classroom wing, and a classroom wing coming off. And it actually works out pretty nicely circulation-wise. Like I said, equal distribution of spaces throughout the building and ease of access. Now we are also proposing out the front here, having an expansion of the cafeteria, and when we do add classrooms, we do also recognize that most of the time it comes with administrative needs as well. So that's the red piece off the front that you're seeing here in this shaded area. All right, moving on to Yorkshire. Yorkshire is Springersbury Township. As far as the zoning, it's just under a 6-acre lot. And it's actually split between 2 different zoning districts. The front half is the NC, and that allows up to 75% impervious area. And the lower half is in the R7, the residential district. So I'm not the right person to be telling you what formula goes into play when you're saying we're half in one zoning, half in the other. But you can see we're kind of sitting right in the middle of that number. So specific calculation would have to be done, analyzing whether you're at the impervious area or not. To meet the program needs here, we are basically proposing, Ellen, as you had pointed out, it was planned to have an addition on it originally. And I believe I saw a drawing that had an addition out this side and an addition out this side, suggesting you put an addition on both wings. The challenge we have on this side is that that's the existing stormwater basin. And instead of proposing that we disturb the little bit of stormwater retainage we have on site, we are proposing just one addition on the opposite side of the building. Now, in both Valley View and Yorkshire, we are unable to solve the site circulation issues just by doing this level of renovation. And in both of those scenarios, we don't really see a way to easily fix those items. Now, when I say fix, the drop off for the parents, the drop off for the buses stacking up here, the parents kind of coming through the front, the use of the back parking lot, that kind of disjointed site circulation, that's what we're referring to in that. And when it was Valley View, it's the stacking up in front of the building with all the parent cars going down the street and around the corner. So back to this one. Jeez. Okay. Sorry, I'm really fighting with this clicker today. Yeah, I might as well. All right, so the addition that we're talking about, still use that. Can you get back to the floor plan, please, Nick? Next one. Opposite direction, please. Keep going. So the floor plan for this one, we're talking about addition at the end of the wing over here. Again, that's the red key plan, or the key plan with the red block. So essentially what this building needs are a couple of classrooms, some special ed rooms, and a better distribution of the small group instruction spaces throughout the building. We did also propose converting one of the collaboration spaces into 2 small group instruction spaces. But essentially, this building was recently renovated. It doesn't have a huge need. And again, we were trying to lightly touch and disturb as little as possible with this building. So pretty much in large parts, it remains the way it is. Next one, please. Indian Rock. As you might remember from the last presentation, there was a significant amount of spaces at Indian Rock that weren't able to be handled within the building's footprint. As such, you see a larger volume of red blocks being added to the building out here. As far as the zoning analysis, this is a 13.81 acre lot. It is Spring Garden Township, and it's in the AO district, which is actually a commercial style district for zoning. So you're actually allowed to go up to 70% impervious area on this site. Not that you would want to do that for a school, because you want to use the site for other green means. So we don't really see an impervious issue with this site. There is a parking challenge with this site that we are aware of. So in this one, we are taking a gesture at trying to solve some of the issues that the site has. Currently, the buses come in the front loop here. They double up with some of the parent drop-off. You have other parents that come around the back, depending on the letter of your last name, and you drop off there. So there's a myriad of solutions here, none of them being great, or problems here, none of them being great. But what we have tried to do with this solution is just limit that front access drive to buses. That's the yellow one you're seeing around front. And we're saying, okay, we do realize we have some overlap here between the bus circulation and the car circulation, but we're proposing that the parents would come into a new loop off the side of the building there with a new entry point off the side as well. So as best as we can, we would be separating these buses from the parent drop-offs. We are also proposing solving some of the parking issue out front here, putting in a strip for visitors and replacing some of the staff parking that would be displaced in the center area. Now, this is a proposal that requires multiple additions to a building. When we try to do additions to a building, we always try and keep them consolidated when it makes sense. And the reason for that is efficiency in construction. This building, the way it's broken up into these pods, doesn't really allow for that. Oh, Nick, could you go back one? Sorry, I forgot about the clicker. So essentially what you have are grade levels in pods here. And I think we're all familiar with the layout of this building. You can't just add on to one of the pods without having an unequal distribution of classrooms throughout the building. So what we're proposing here is a small addition on the end of each one, expanding the classroom, getting a larger, more appropriately sized collaboration space, and getting small group instruction spaces at the end of each one of these wings. We will have to replace some mechanical, Each one of these that we're proposing the access corridor through back to the existing building is a mechanical closet, so we'd have to redo some of the utilities there. Now, as part of Indian Rock and as part of Indian Rock and East York, the gym and the cafeteria and the auditorium all double up as one space. They serve multiple hats, serve multiple functions, wear multiple hats. So in each one of these, it was a program initiative that you get rid of that situation. So basically, we're proposing a new gymnasium being added on the back of the building here. And this is where that new entry, that parent drop-off point could happen, allowing the existing gym, cafeteria, and auditorium to be just a cafeteria auditorium. Also gives us some space for related classes. You got music, arts, and a wellness classroom back there. And we were able to get some more special education spaces throughout the building. This building is a spot that also has a lack of administrative square footage. So we'd be proposing that art room be placed back here, expanding into that nurse and art room space and creating a more appropriate administrative and health suite. Back one more, please. All right, East York. Again, with the site circulation. So we approached this site saying, okay, we got the program elements that we need to add to this, but how can we also solve some of those circulation issues throughout the building, throughout the site, I should say. We would have one access point. We don't believe we'd be able to change that. So you'd have both the buses and the parents coming in through one access point. We'd be putting an addition on the back of the building for many of the same reasons we just talked about with Indian Rock. And we're proposing that a parent drop-off loop could be brought back here. Now, we do notice in the plot of your land that you do own the land all the way out to the back road here, and there's a possibility that we'd be able to extend that road out the back and create better circulation. So a parent would be able to come in here. We'd want to replace or move the dumpsters that are against the building here, possibly to the other side, and create better circulation, drop off for parents, exit out the back. And since we are building over top the existing parking there, we'd want to replace the parking for staff and for the evening activities. Advance to the next one. So in this building, we're doing many of the same moves that you saw at Indian Rock. So gymnasium out the back, set of classrooms there that pair up with the program in that part of the building. And we're taking some of the classrooms, breaking them up into small group instruction spaces. So what is previously a classroom here has the ability to become 2 small group instruction spaces, which solves a lot of the program needs throughout the building with those small group spaces. We are, again, carving in collaboration spaces throughout the building at key points, creating good equity throughout the layout. And we are also doing the same recommendation. We've moved art to the front in this case and expanding the office suite into an adjacent area to create more appropriate office space. Good to go. All right, the middle school. Middle school is another one where we had a challenge with some of the site circulation, and it's another one that due to some of the constraints, we weren't able to provide a solution that would separate things to the extent where you'd want them. So essentially, the site circulation in the middle school remains the same. What we have done is we're proposing some renovations to the front of the building and proposing some additions to the back of the building. Now, as far as the allowable impervious area here, it is the Springersbury Township R10, 23.12 acres, which gives you an allowable 40% impervious, and we're going to be hovering right around the 30% by the end of it. Next, please. So what have we done here? We have an addition out the back where we have available land, and we're essentially reusing that previous large group instruction space. It got converted into a special education suite during one of the last renovations. We'd be converting it into 2 classrooms appropriately sized, one being special education, and then adding on the back of the building to solve some of the classroom discrepancies throughout the building. Again, we're converting many of the classrooms, some of the small group instruction spaces to 2 small, let me repeat that. We are proposing converting some classrooms into 2 small group instruction spaces by splitting them down the middle. So you see those in red spread around the building. And one of the other moves that we're proposing here is expanding into the courtyard a little bit to solve that issue that we have with the fact that there is no orchestra practice space. Currently, if you remember, the orchestra practices in the lobby or in the auditorium right now. So there was a previous investigation in trying to figure out how to solve the music needs in this building. That seemed like a reasonable solution in the right area of the building. Again, the administrative suite in this for the increased enrollment, or the enrollment projections, I should say, the administrative suite could be expanded and a new entry could be carved out of that space to create a more appropriate drop-off area. Next, please. And then the high school. This is showing both Valley View and the high school. And again, these are all the same numbers that you'd seen on the previous slide. Since it is one lot, it's pretty much the same zoning analysis with impervious area. The big move we're making here on the site is that we're proposing a expansion of the parking out the front here. So instead of having the looped drop-off that you have right here, we're proposing a larger bus drop-off out the front, which would help alleviate much of the congestion that you have in the back of the building here. It also gives us the ability to have a longer stacking for both the buses dropping off in the front, connected by a walk path to the main entry, and a larger stacking for the parent drop-off that happens here. So instead of the stacking happening back out into the street towards Hollywood, you'll be able to have the parents stack around the back of the building. What we're proposing here are several small additions onto the building: science wing, some of the arts program, and then some elements at the front. Next, please. So we'll start from left to right. As far as the science wing, we are proposing converting many of those undersized science rooms. I believe we expressed last meeting, it's pairs of 3 that happen along the side of the existing lab. So we'd be converting those pairs of 3 into pairs of 2 and redistributing the space, the square footage back into the rooms to make appropriately sized labs. When you do that, we end up a couple labs short, which is why a building addition is proposed on the end of the building to serve the extra needs for those classrooms. We are also going through and proposing some renovations to spaces within the building, an expansion of the fitness center, renovations to the tech eds, renovation to the family consumer science there, and expansions of the classrooms here to address the undersized classroom issues. One of the big moves we're making to the entry here, we're proposing a small addition on the front of the building to get the administrative suite out of the corner here and pull it out into the front of the building. So in doing that, we've increased the square footage a little bit, and we've created a new entry corridor, kind of a lobby to the building right there. On the second floor, square footage issues in the classrooms were resolved by repartitioning spaces, and we are proposing a media center renovation along with that. Next, please. Schedule. So if all of this work were to be done, you're obviously not going to do it all at the same time. There'd be a schedule in play, you'd plan out ahead of time. And this is a schedule proposed that 2 projects run in tandem, 2 side by side, and that's the way you tackle it. So we have basically 3 waves of projects proposed here. Indian Rock and the middle school would be in wave 1. And that design process would take about a year from the time that the green light's given. So Indian Rock is one of the ones that has the biggest need as far as failing infrastructure. So that's why that's prioritized as number 1. Middle school, that also has some infrastructure needs. And again, that's the reason those 2 were proposed as first. So basically you then pair up high school and East York, and then finish it out with Valley View and Yorkshire. So construction, if you're to go that path, construction will continue through February 2026. Questions on any of that before John jumps in? Okay. Let John cover some of the budget.
Thank you. Okay, so as we head into the construction cost estimates, go ahead and advance, please. Wanted to just cover some terminology and tell you a little bit about our thought process when we're preparing estimates, particularly of this magnitude for a little over 600,000 square feet of existing building. Seth walked you through the additions, which takes us over 700,000 square feet of total building area. But first and foremost, as a board, when we're showing you cost, we're showing you a total project cost. It is not just construction. We've prepared cost for the area to be renovated, the area of new additions, site work, all the soft costs and fees. So it's an apples to apples comparison. Every estimate that we're going to show you will include all those things, even allowances for loose equipment and furniture, because we know in the planning of a project, you will be contemplating those things. So we do make some assumptions about what to carry in our estimates. But we want to include all those items, particularly with even permitting and escalation and financing. So every estimate is comprehensive. The cost to upgrade is really stay as you are and just address the building code issues and bring the building up to current construction standards. That is a Department of Education frame of reference. In the PlanCon environment, the expectation is that any project that the district proceeds with, that you would be bringing your building up to meet the current building code and construction standards. It does not address the educational program enhancements. Okay, that's just to bring your building up to current building code. This third item is important because particularly as you start to see these costs come together, I will always reiterate that a board is in control and the board establishes the budget, but there are only two ways to approach that. And one is a budget which is driven by the scope, and one is scope that is driven by the budget. And we'll describe that as we go through this process. For the purpose of our estimates, when we talk about a comprehensive renovation, we are comparing that to a new building. Because I think if you can imagine, if we start skewing the scope of work in every single building and there's 6 projects and there are 3 options, that's going to become overly complex. So for the purpose of our cost estimating, we have these cost categories where we look at areas that are limited renovation, where you may have done work recently that are pertaining to finishes, moderate, which would be all of the light plus picking up your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing upgrades. Major is when you start seeing we're reconfiguring, at the middle school, the high school, where we're reconfiguring the interior of existing space and we're providing all new mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. And then, of course, a new building, as you see the cost of renovation, it's a natural question to think, well, for that dollar amount, why would we not consider new building? So you also have that as a comparison. Quite honestly, this is really part of the essence of the study that helps make decisions about how you prioritize your projects and the level of renovation and the budget that you want to set forth as you move forward. So next, please. So just to establish some baseline, you heard Dr. Krauser mentioned that second agenda item was building system upgrades to avoid interruption of service. We wanted to show you this slide of each of the buildings, obviously Yorkshire with its relatively recent construction of 2010 or 11. We're not carrying dollars to replace those systems because they're operational. However, if we were to look at only addressing the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, including with 20% soft costs, for all the buildings total, we're looking at a range of about $50 to $55 million. So that kind of sets a threshold of the order of magnitude, if you will, of the work that is required just to implement building systems to avoid interruption of service. Again, this slide does not address your projected enrollment or your planned educational program. So we kind of wanted to at least talk about that first benchmark of those costs. Next. Turn it back over to Dr.
Sure.
Krauser.
I'll just jump in real quick. And again, kind of going back from that very beginning statement, the task was certainly for us to assess those basic costs. But as we move forward, we want to investigate those again. 3 legs that stool is where we're investigating the facilities, the programming, and the finances and those efficiencies. That's why this evening's not a recommendation, rather our way to look at how we can move forward. So we've established the projected enrollments. We've established the guiding principles for our educational program as they lay that foundation forward with our charge to develop an optimal academic opportunity for the entire student population based on those goals for a financially sustainable framework. So that's kind of where Mr. Padilla is kind of leading into that notion of, so just that basic approach to just the mechanical provided one piece. Now, what would option 1 on the basic footprint look like as that lays us into a foundation for option 4 and 5 in the study? I'll kick it back to you.
Thank you. So again, the plans that we took you through tonight are design concepts that basically implement that educational program, and we've come up with a concept that we could arrive at square footage so that we could accurately measure how much square footage is needed to satisfy the program in terms of additions. We've mentioned areas of reconfiguration, which would be a major construction cost category, and then and minor construction as well. So the next slide, I'll walk you through some of the data. So starting on the left, again, first and foremost, tonight, this is option 1. So this is maintaining your current grade alignments. So Valley View and Yorkshire remain K2s. I'm going to go left to right. We have the existing building area, the proposed scope, which would be in additions and renovations. In this particular option, we are not proposing the grade reconfiguration, so it would be maintained. And then the next column is how much square footage was necessary to implement the educational program and address the building deficiencies. Following column is the total square footage. To the far right are the costs that all the terminology was referring to. So on the far right-hand side, we have a range of cost for each of the projects. Valley View is about a $10 to $11 million project in cost range. Now, someone might say, well, why are we having a range? This is a study. We proposed a schedule just to look at the sequence and durations of the projects that Seth presented earlier. We don't know the timing, and we certainly don't know the board's expectation on all of these budgets. So a range of cost is necessary at a study level. As the board selects to proceed on a project, that range would diminish and you would start to enter into schematic design and have a more finite cost addressing all the items from the sites to the buildings themselves. Continuing down, I want to point out Yorkshire. As your enrollment, when you look at an enrollment projection, it's obvious that not all these students will be arriving all at the same time. So one of the things that we proposed is Yorkshire, because of how tight the site is, we thought that that is an option that the board could elect to wait and phase that potential addition. The rest of the building and its systems are in good condition, so we were pretty much holding off. We're carrying some costs to address some minor issues, but that is not a major project. And we're thinking if that enrollment increase does come to fruition, the board would have the ability to then move forward on that project if necessary. East York and Indian Rock are currently grade 3 through 5s and would remain. Both also are comprehensive additions and renovations. Now you can see the amount of square footage based on, if you can remember the graphic, East York was proposing about 19,500 square feet, but Indian Rock was substantial. It was about 31,000 square feet. And Seth mentioned one thing that is unique to that building, its organization. We needed to create a corridor access to get to each one of those pods. It was not the most terribly efficient, but in terms of the building organization, team teaching, and grade configuration, those additions on each of those buildings became, or those pods became necessary. And obviously the subsequent cost of that for East York ranging from almost 16 to 17 million and between 19 and 20 million for Indian Rock. Last two projects, the middle school again remaining a 6 through 8, comprehensive additions and renovations. Now the middle school, if you look back to your key plan too, this would be another easy opportunity to review that. Very little addition. We had some in the courtyard, some out front to pull the admin, nurse and guidance area together. And then there was that one classroom wing. So you can see how varied the new addition square footages vary throughout each of the solutions, which puts the middle school potentially at $28 to $29 million. Now the high school, a little over 200,000 square feet. In context of an addition renovation, we were adding about 28,000 square feet. And one of the things in this particular option with that addition at the front of the building We also looked at it for swing space. So we started thinking about phasing because it will be very difficult in our minds how you would renovate this building with all the students during a fully occupied school year. That addition would be started first, and then we could use it as swing space for temporary classrooms. That way, when construction is complete and it's returned to a administration area, I think we have guidance located there, the virtual learning area and the drop-in center. And then on the second floor, we could use as temporary classrooms during construction as well, and then turn it over to the media center when it's finished. The reason why we thought about that was the idea of locating, 8 or 10 modulars on this site during construction would be very, very difficult. It's also very costly. So that gave us the justification to propose that addition out front, develop a new main entrance, and then we were able to separate the bus traffic in the front and move the drivers and parents to the back. At that square footage, again, for the high school, you're looking at about $46 to $48 million. And then the totals for each, as I started out saying, you're already dealing with a little over 600,000 square feet as a starting point to satisfy the educational program, as well as project an enrollment and some of the deficiencies, undersized classrooms, we've named many. It's going to require about 95 or 96,000 square feet of additional space to satisfy that program. Now, one little caveat when we talked about the schedule, when we come back and we show you what does option 4 look like and option 5, we're going to use the same program. So we understand from the administrative team what you're looking for K through 12. We're just going to reconfigure the grade alignments and study those, what are the pros and cons of each of those changes. The other reason I think we proposed the schedule earlier is, and I remember, I think saying this at one point, no district at any point in time when we conclude a study is, gives us a thumbs up and says, yep, we're going to do it all, let's get started. It's an order of magnitude, and it helps you prioritize where to start, and it's a financial planning tool to determine over the many years of construction and design and regulatory approval, how do you put that budget together that you can move forward. Next, so we want to do some comparative analysis again to bring you back to just addressing the HVAC and electrical plumbing systems. You're in that $50 to $55 million range. Option 1 for the comprehensive renovations and additions, the totals are on the right. And if we go to the next, I think we've built in the delta to show you what's the difference between what's required to satisfy the educational program, projected enrollment, building deficiencies, and so forth. So we wanted to kind of give that comparative analysis off to the right, on the far right, which is the delta representing the difference between just addressing MEP systems and comprehensive addition and renovations. At this point, I'll turn it back to Dr. Krauser, talk a little bit about the points of consideration and some of the ideas we heard about the efficiencies and how we'll be looking at options 4 and 5 when we come back to you shortly. Sure.
Okay, before you go away, the Yorkshire option as shown there price-wise does not include the addition that was on the drawings.
Yeah,
and I understand it's optional. I think a lot of things on this are optional. But what's the cost of that piece? I mean, that was part of the proposal, and then we omitted it from the dollars.
Well, I guess we're not sure of the timing of that. For instance, to implement Valley View in Yorkshire at full capacity, I would think that you would want those students to be near, or I think what you might want to avoid is if you were to include that right out of the gate, you'd be building space that might sit empty. So we can add it with the caveat that you may choose to wait and do it later. Or if we're all wrong about the enrollment projection, you may not do it at all. So we were a little uncertain about what to do with that, but we could plug it in as long as we understand that's not something we think is absolutely necessary. And the Yorkshire site is very tight. The impervious area is a challenge. We weren't able to improve the site circulation. So there were a couple of things that we felt like leaving that at this point in time, but we can certainly add it moving forward.
Well, I guess from the apples to apples standpoint, when we get to options 4 and 5, I'm gonna guess you're gonna leave the additional people that you wanted to service in the new buildings or in the new configurations in there. So this will not be apples to apples at that point. So I'd at least like to see the line
Sure.
item
Oh, absolutely.
that says, like, this can be one of them, and then at the bottom, here's what we would need to do, because my recollection is the Valley View and Yorkshire enrollment numbers both presented a picture that we'd have an issue with the number of kids in the school. So we would, in theory, need to build the addition. So I'd just like to see I'd like to see those numbers tacked on. Or like I said,
Sure.
even if it's a separate line item, so we can
Right.
process that. But
It's a good point because I think as we get to 4 and 5, you're going to have a similar question when we show a consolidated K3 building. So good point. We'll modify that going forward. And I think, again, the purpose of this exercise is to identify the order of magnitude and get a feel for, this is the first that we've shown you a sequence of projects. One of the reasons we were looking at pairing them up was to possibly combine bid them so that you could get some cost savings by doing 2 projects at once. And then again, for the purpose of the capacity issue, you could proceed with the Valley View project first, see and continue to monitor your enrollment, and you may push Yorkshire off. You could satisfy the additional increase, but you may be forced that they come quicker and that addition might be necessary. So we'll pull that forward.
to me, whether or not we implement it in 5 years or in 10 or 15, it's still part of the cost of this cycle of us figuring out what we're doing, especially when we go to compare it against the other 2 options.
Right. When 1, 4, and 5 come together side by side, there will be some things that will fit very nicely in comparison and some that are going to be a little bit more of a challenge. But at least if we can isolate them, then you'll be able to make your decision moving forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
If I could just jump in with another question for
Sure.
you. And again, I'm not a contractor, so when I look at the cost per square foot here, right, it's at 96,000 square feet. You're looking at 1,250 to 1,330 per square foot. I'm trying to get my arms around
Sure.
what that means. How does that compare if I had land available and I was to build a 96,000 square foot facility? What would my average cost to build an educational institution be there?
Okay, so let me back up a little bit. When we talk about total project cost, in terms of bricks and mortars, typically we refer to the building footprint as its structure cost.
Yep.
Site is separated because in your exact scenario, that would assume that we're purchasing land that we don't know where and what it might cost.
Let's say the district had land. I'm just trying
Okay.
to figure out what would be the cost to build a brand new building at 96,000 square feet.
What grade level?
High school.
Okay, so high school is probably going to be in a 225 to 240 range, bricks and mortar plus site work and soft costs. Throughout our estimates, I thought the question you were going to ask is why is the dollar per square foot different? I'll use Indian Rock versus say
I'm not
East
there
York.
yet, but yes,
Oh, okay.
that's part of my questions too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I answer your first question?
Yes.
And I think the other gentleman's point, we need to add the new building cost, even though I think that as a cost comparison, it's very important because you need to see that in a study. Yes, we don't know where that might be and what it might cost, but we will start to show you. In fact, we went through the same exercise of, when you start looking at a $45 million number, what would be the potential range to replace the high school? Well, it's closer to 70 million. So there's a tremendous value to refurbishing this existing facility. So those are some other pieces of information I think that we will add. I don't think you're going to be building a new high school, but it's important information to have for cost comparative purposes. So the other point is you'll see that in the case of Indian Rock, we're looking at 4 additions on a fairly small building. So you're now touching the existing wall in several locations. That dollar per square foot cost is higher than say Valley View, that we're really only putting on 1 addition because it's more consolidated. Ground floor construction, all 1 story, is more costly per square foot than multi-story once you factor the stair towers and elevators. So Again, when you look at option 4 and 5, those dollar per square foot ranges, we start showing you in East York, a 2-story academic wing, we can reduce the footprint and go up, and that is more cost effective. So those dollar per square foot analyses are a little bit different. The amount of construction, if you look at, say, Valley View, is only about a 9,000 square foot addition in option 1. However, you start looking at Indian Rock, that's 31,000. Now you'll start to get a little bit of equity in the dollar per square foot from a contractor. A smaller addition will be a higher dollar per square foot cost.
Like the middle school,
Yes. Yep.
which is what?
Yeah, I think
almost
the middle
triple.
school is upwards of
It's triple.
8,500 square feet. Actually, you picked a very good example, the courtyard construction. It was not our preference to build in that courtyard, but programmatically to put that orchestra room somewhere else just for the sake of putting it there will not work. It will not function. So that courtyard construction might approach $250 a square foot to a little bit higher, just because of the logistics of building within a courtyard. So there's a lot of variables. When we looked at this front addition, what's the differential between trying to renovate and expand using the media center and the front of the building, or will it be more costly than just removing it and constructing a new academic wing because there's grade issues, there's steps, it's handicap accessibility. So those are things that get kind of ironed out in a schematic design. But again, we're trying to take a comprehensive approach to the solution and the cost estimate.
And looking at, kind of the timeline of what you're referring to here, and taking into account the fact we've got supply chain constraints, we've got inflation, hyperinflation going on right now. I mean, can you give me a little perspective on how much that's contributing to this cost right now? Whether it's, steel's up whatever year over year, or whatever.
It's pretty scary. I'm approaching my 30th year in this profession, and while I have seen all kinds of things through the 2008 recession, hurricane impacts to roofing materials, this one is unique because it does not have the ability to recover as quickly. And it seems like almost weekly, someone in our office is saying, "Hey, we're now hearing emergency generators are 32 weeks out. Doors and windows are 22 weeks." Had a change order proposal for a project where the contractor can no longer get the roofing, and they're looking for a force majeure scenario to pursue additional funds. I think if you look back over the last 40 years of construction, and the way that we look at cost is means construction cost data. It's an industry standard for recording and monitoring what has taken place and what is projected to take place. There are peaks and valleys, there are plateaus. This will settle. This seems like a premium dollar per square foot, but it does add a little anxiety as to the architects to try to project what does the lack of availability translate in terms of cost. We've built an escalation factor into the models for 3% a year to the midpoint of construction. So typically what we do for our estimates, because contractors are not able to purchase every material for every aspect of the project the day the project is bid. So we take it to the midpoint of construction. So that's the other reason we use that phasing schedule to find out where are we at from design to the midpoint of construction. So for high school, you're looking at almost 24 months, if not longer, potentially, of construction. So if it's a year in design, we're estimating for 1 year of design and 1 year of construction. So we're building 3%. Has it been more? Yes. And some of these material issues are well beyond that, but they will settle down once the industry is able to get caught up with, hollow metal frames, roofing and insulation, and electrical equipment seems to be very, very scarce for bidders to get. We've done our best to forecast. We also receiving project bids very routinely. And we try to dissect them very closely to not say, well, just that instance in that particular project means it's going to directly translate to you. It depends. Again, those areas of square footage, the duration of the project, the size of the project. We also have estimating contingency built into each of the estimates, which ranges from 3 to 5%. On a smaller project, we would tend to lean more towards 5% at a study level. But when you start looking at the middle school and the high school, we might back that off to 4%. You could be talking the order of magnitude of $1.5 million just for estimating contingency. So again, if we showed you the detail of our estimates, they're all different because of the size of the project and the duration.
Okay,
It
thanks.
was a long answer, but
Nope.
I knew where you were headed, okay?
Thanks.
Thank you for all of this. How much loss of usable space during construction would you anticipate and for how long? I'm thinking about school year impacts. Obviously, this is slightly less impact doing a retrofit expansion. I know you're doing some work on demoing classrooms and some of the internals of the buildings in order to move classrooms elsewhere, but generally you're adding
Sure.
out.
I'll answer the first part, and I think you're going to want to add something to that perhaps. Generally, what we try to do is look for areas of new construction that could commence first. Once those spaces are finished and substantially complete, then we would move students into the new area and then slowly rotate through. The only project that I actually increased the budget for modulars was the middle school because of so little square footage. There's just simply not enough space to construct that you could significantly move that many students. The middle school is a problem. Therefore, we carried an allowance to put modulars on the middle school site, which are actually easier than locating them on this high school site. That's generally the approach we would always take. And then, of course, the high school, by constructing the addition out front and using that as swing space. So, 12 to 15 months after construction starts, we would have the first whole wing of an existing building vacate, go out into the new addition, and then you would go through several phases of rotation of students throughout. But there certainly is, it's a good point. We've thought about phasing, we've got design concepts and budgets. The operation of how you deliver your educational program during construction is a challenge for sure. We would work with the administrative team to try to minimize that as best as possible and also try to reduce the duration of construction. The longer that goes, it's harder for the district, it's harder for the students and staff, and it costs more money. Now, you might also say, well, then let's just accelerate it. We'll try to do that, but we also don't want to go the other way and pay a premium because we're condensing too much construction in a small period of time. So we try to find the balance based on the complexity of the project, the size, and how much new construction we can start so kids can swing into that area.
Just to clarify something, just because the terminology might be lost on me. By modulars, do you mean trailers?
I do.
Okay. I would love it if going forward we could have an estimate of like trailer days for students, if you understand what I'm saying. How many
From a
students
scheduling
would be in
perspective?
trailers for
Oh.
how long? Okay. Just
Yeah,
because
I think, sure. I think at the middle school, it might, we might talk a little bit more about that because I know that admin team's going to be concerned about security, technology, restroom location, where they are in proximity to the building. A lot of times districts will want them as close as possible, like immediately adjacent to, and that presents a fire rating issue, which makes the cost of the trailers increase in cost. So again, it's kind of a balance. And where would they go that they wouldn't have to be moved? We also thought about if you did acquire modulars, could they move from site to site? And if so, then we could maybe shorten the construction duration schedule if modulars are acceptable to you.
one last question, I promise. Could you roll back to the layout for the change layout for the high school?
Sure. Floor plan or the site or both?
The floor plan. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, I would be happy to be mistaken about this. Is there not a significant expansion of administrative space? I may be misunderstanding what's meant by administrative space,
Yes.
but I don't recall hearing that a lack of space for administrators was an issue.
Good point. And that I believe is correct. However, in order to provide the amount of classrooms in the two academic wings, we pulled the nurse and guidance and admin out of those areas so we could pull them together. And it was more primarily driven by security so that you could have your administrative team at the front of this proposed entrance. So I would say that was more of a design solution. It was not an administrative request. We try to make this most efficient use of the existing wings to turn back to classrooms by pulling them out. We did the same thing at the middle school. Now, we left guidance in its current location, but the nurse is down the hallway. So we pulled the nurse up with the administrative area and kept the guidance in its same. This was at this size of the facility with the dual entrances. By pulling those program areas out of the existing building, we thought that would be a better use.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Sure.
Put that in present, but I can just add more to that. When we talked about those types of particular programs, bringing the efficiencies of that level of support to one location provides better support for students and families as they're coming in instead of escorting back and forth from certain areas. And to Mr. Badia's point, that security piece, it allows us to open the facilities if we're using nursing or guidance at different hours and maintain security within the building without opening all the way up. Yeah. So kind of to bring everything back to this base level conversation. Again, this evening was to really establish that context. We did not really, and from a study perspective, this is the deep dive that we've been doing and engaging in conversations. Coming back to the very, very, very beginning allows us to ask the right questions of what does this mean for the organization K-12 without moving in a direction that addresses some of these talks about efficiencies and fiscal planning. And that's where we're going to be going in next. This is that kind of base context to say, how do we address the mechanical needs and what would it look like on the existing footprint? And by diving deeply into that, engaging in the conversations and looking at these 4 plans, it allows us to generate greater questions, generate greater ideas and solutions to come up with our recommendations for efficiencies as well as programming. So moving forward, as we said in the very beginning, the next step will be kind of the financial awareness of where we are as Mrs. Chichuli brings us together, I believe on the 18th, correct me if I'm wrong. And that will start to lay the foundation of what does the financials look like to start, as then we move into the next 2 study developments. Anything to add, gentlemen? Additional questions? And we'll be sharing all this with you too you'll have access to these documents too.